Lydia Reynolds didn't just lose the ability to walk that rainy November night. She lost the illusion of who she was sleeping next to. When the intoxicated truck driver careened across the median on I-95, instinct took over. She threw her body across the center console to shield her husband, taking the crushing impact of the steel frame directly into her spine. But 6 months later, as she sat in a wheelchair learning to navigate a world that wasn't built for her, the man whose life she saved didn't hand her flowers or a thank you note. He handed her divorce papers. He wasn't just leaving because things got hard. He was leaving to merge his life and his dwindling bank account with the heiress of a pharmaceutical empire. This is the story of how a woman discarded as broken rebuilt herself to destroy the man who thought she was helpless. The silence in the Audi Q7 was usually comfortable, but tonight it felt heavy, weighted down by the unspoken tension of Caleb's failing business deal. Lydia adjusted the thermostat, glancing at her husband. Caleb Reynolds was a handsome man, jawline sharp enough to cut glass, with the kind of charisma that usually closed deals before lunch. But lately, the stress of Reynolds' logistics was etching deep lines around his eyes. "It's going to be fine, Cal," Lydia said softly, reaching out to touch his arm. "We can remortgage the house if we need to. I can take on more freelance graphic design work." "We're a team," Caleb sighed, his grip tightening on the leather steering wheel. "You don't get it, Lyd. It's not just about the money. It's about the reputation. If this merger with Kensington Corp falls through, I'm a laughingstock in Boston." Lydia opened her mouth to speak, but the world suddenly tilted. Headlights. Blinding, white-hot headlights from a semi-truck that had hydroplaned across the slick, rain-soaked asphalt of the highway. It was coming directly for the driver's side. Time didn't slow down, it accelerated into a chaotic blur. Lydia didn't think about her career, her future, or fear. She saw Caleb frozen, eyes wide with terror. With a scream that tore from her throat, she unbuckled and threw her upper body across the console, trying to push him, shield him, anything to put mass between him and the collision. Grunge. The sound was the worst part. It wasn't just metal twisting, it was the sickening snap of bone. The car spun 3 times before slamming into the guardrail. Lydia woke up 3 weeks later in the ICU at Massachusetts General Hospital. The beeping of the monitors was the first thing she registered. Then the blinding white light. Then the realization that she couldn't feel her legs. Lydia, it was Caleb. He was sitting in the corner, looking disheveled, holding a cup of stale hospital coffee. He rushed over when he saw her eyes flutter open. "Oh, thank God." "Lyd, you're awake, Caleb." Her voice was a rasp, like sandpaper over stone. "Are you?" "Okay," he nodded frantically, tears welling in his eyes. "I'm fine. Just a broken arm and some whiplash." You saved me, Lyd." The doctors said if you hadn't thrown your weight over, the steering column would have crushed my chest. "You took the hit." Lydia tried to smile, but panic was setting in. "Why can't I move my toes, Cal?" Caleb's face fell. The door opened, and Dr. Aris Prentice, a neurosurgeon with a grim expression, walked in. That was the moment Lydia's life cleaved into two parts, before and after. T12, complete spinal cord injury. Paralyzed from the waist down. Unlikely to ever walk again. The next 6 months were a blur of agony and rehabilitation at the Spaulding Rehabilitation Hospital. Lydia fought. She fought through the tears, through the humiliation of needing nurses to help her bathe, through the phantom pains that felt like fire shooting down legs she couldn't move. But as Lydia fought to regain her life, Caleb began to ghost her. At first, he visited every day. Then it was every other day. "Work is crazy," he'd say, checking his watch. "The merger is back on the table." By month 4, he was visiting once a week. He stopped bringing flowers. He stopped holding her hand. He started taking phone calls in the hallway, his voice dropping to a whisper whenever she looked at him. "Who was that?" Lydia asked one afternoon, straining to lift herself into her wheelchair, her arms trembling with the effort. "Just work." "Beatrice Kensington, the CEO's daughter." "She's overseeing the accounts," Caleb said, not meeting her eyes. He was typing furiously on his phone. "You smell nice," Lydia noted, trying to bridge the distance. "New cologne. Beatrice gave it to me. A client gift." "Look, Lyd, I have to go." "Big dinner meeting." He kissed her forehead. It felt cold. Impersonal. Like kissing a distant aunt. Lydia sat alone in her room, staring at the rain streaking against the window. She was a fighter, but she had a sinking feeling that the man she had sacrificed her body for was already halfway out the door. The day Lydia was discharged was supposed to be a celebration. She had mastered the transfer from bed to chair. She had learned how to drive a modified hand-control car. She was ready to go home to their Victorian house in Brookline. She rolled herself out to the pickup area, a small bag of clothes on her lap. Caleb's car pulled up. But it wasn't the Audi. It was a sleek, black Mercedes convertible she didn't recognize. And Caleb wasn't driving. A woman was behind the wheel. She was stunning in a way that felt manufactured, perfect platinum blonde bob, oversized sunglasses, and a sharp, predatory smile. Beatrice Kensington. Caleb got out of the passenger's side. He looked better than he had in years. New suit tailored. Italian leather shoes. He looked like money. "Caleb," Lydia asked, confused. "Where's the car? We need to talk, Lydia," Caleb said. He didn't move to help her with her bag. He didn't even open the trunk. "Who is this?" Lydia asked, though she knew. The woman in the driver's seat took off her sunglasses, revealing ice blue eyes that looked at Lydia with a mix of pity and disgust. "I'm Beatrice," the woman said, her voice smooth like expensive whiskey. "Caleb has told me so much about your situation." "My situation," Lydia snapped. "You mean my husband?" "Lydia, please," Caleb said, rubbing his temples. Let's not make a scene in front of the hospital. Take me home, Caleb. That's the thing, Caleb said, finally looking her in the eye. He reached into his jacket pocket. He didn't pull out house keys. He pulled out a thick manila envelope. You can't go back to the house in Brookline. It's not accessible. Too many stairs. We can install a ramp. We talked about this. Lydia's heart was hammering against her ribs. No, Caleb said, his voice hardening. I sold the house, Lydia. The world stopped spinning. Are you? You what? I sold it 3 days ago. I needed the equity to buy into the partnership with Kensington Corp. And to pay for this, he gestured vaguely at her wheelchair. Your medical bills are astronomical. Insurance didn't cover everything. You sold our home while I was in rehab, Lydia screamed, gripping the armrests of her chair until her knuckles turned white. Where am I supposed to live? I rented you a place, Caleb said quickly. It's an apartment in Southie. Ground floor. Fully accessible. It's paid up for 6 months. He thrust the envelope into her lap. And these? These are for you, Lydia looked down. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Divorce, she whispered. Caleb, I took a bullet for you. I took a truck for you, and I'm grateful, Caleb shouted, causing a passing nurse to look over. He lowered his voice, his face twisting into an ugly grimace. I am grateful, Lydia. But look at you. Look at us. I'm a man in his prime. I have needs. I have a future. I can't be a caretaker. I can't be pushing a wheelchair for the rest of my life. It's not what I signed up for. You signed up for in sickness and in health. That was before I knew sickness meant you becoming a dead weight. The words hung in the air, cruel and final. Beatrice laughed softly from the car. Come on, Cal. We're going to be late for the gala. She has the papers. Caleb took a step back. The apartment is nice, Lydia. Really? And I'm leaving you the old Hondas. It's being fitted with hand controls now. My lawyer will be in touch about the settlement. But don't expect much. The business debts. Well, you know, he turned his back on her. He walked to the Mercedes, slid into the passenger seat, and didn't look back as Beatrice sped away, leaving Lydia sitting on the curb of the hospital pickup zone, holding her own divorce papers, the exhaust fumes choking her as she sobbed. But as the tears fell, something else began to rise in Lydia's chest. It wasn't just sorrow. It was a cold, hard rage. She looked down at the papers. She looked at the signature of Caleb's lawyer, Sterling, Cooper, and Ross. She wiped her eyes. She wasn't dead. She was just paralyzed. And Caleb Reynolds had just made a fatal error. He assumed that because she couldn't walk, she couldn't fight. He forgot that before she was his wife, Lydia Reynolds was the lead forensic accountant for one of the biggest firms in New York City. She had given up that career to help him build his logistics company. She knew where the bodies were buried because she had helped dig the holes. Lydia wheeled herself toward the taxi stand. "Take me to South Boston," she told the driver. "I have some reading to do." The accessible apartment Caleb had rented for her was a generous description. It was a converted basement unit in an old brick building on the wrong side of South Boston. The ramp was steep and rickety, made of plywood that looked like it would rot through after the first winter storm. Inside, it smelled of damp concrete and neglect. The windows were high and barred, letting in slivers of grey light. There was a small kitchenette, a hospital bed that Caleb must have rented cheaply, and a bathroom that, to his credit, had a roll-in shower, though the tiles were cracked and yellowed. Lydia spent the first week in a state of catatonic shock. She ordered takeout, stared at the peeling paint on the ceiling, and ignored the buzzing of her phone. Her friends, the ones she and Caleb shared, had gone silent. It was amazing how quickly social circles tightened around the one with the money and the power. Caleb was the rising star of Kensington Corp now. Lydia was the tragic accident everyone wanted to forget because looking at her made them uncomfortable. But on the 8th day, the pity party ended. She was eating cold lo mein out of a carton when her eyes landed on a box Caleb had dumped in the corner. It was labeled Lydia's office junk. She wheeled over and ripped the tape off. Inside were her old sketchbooks, her calculator, her certification plaques, and a hard drive. Her heart skipped a beat. This was the external backup drive for Reynolds Logistics. She used to do the books for Caleb before the business got too big, and he hired an external firm. She plugged the drive into her laptop. It was password protected, of course. But Caleb was a creature of habit. The password wasn't his birthday or hers. It was the date he opened his first bank account. She typed it in. Access granted. Lydia began to dig. She wasn't looking for proof of the affair. She already knew that. She was looking for money. Caleb claimed he was broke, that the house sale covered debts. But Beatrice Kensington didn't date broke men. She spent 3 weeks analyzing the data. She built spreadsheets that covered the walls of her tiny apartment. She tracked shell companies, offshore transfers, and vendor payments. And then she found it. Project Blue Horizon. 2 years ago, Caleb had been desperate. He had borrowed $2 million from the company accounts, money that belonged to investors, to fund a side venture in crypto mining servers. The venture failed. To cover the hole, he had falsified invoices from a dummy corporation in the Cayman Islands. But here was the kicker: the intellectual property for the logistics software that Reynolds Logistics used, the very software that made his company valuable to Kensington Corp, wasn't owned by the company. Lydia pulled a dusty file from the bottom of the box. 5 years ago, when Caleb was just starting out, he couldn't afford a coder. Lydia, who dabbled in coding, had written the core algorithm for the routing system. She had registered the copyright in her maiden name, Lydia Bennett, as a birthday joke, framing the certificate for him. He had never transferred the rights to the LLC. Technically, Reynolds Logistics, and by extension, the new merger with Kensington Corp, was running on stolen property. Her property. Lydia sat back in her wheelchair, a smile finally touching her lips. It wasn't a nice smile. She needed a lawyer. Not a strip mall divorce lawyer. She needed a shark. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she hadn't used in 10 years. Daniel Ross, a deep voice answered. Daniel, it's Lydia Bennett. I need a favor. And I think you're going to enjoy this one. Daniel Ross was the Ross in Sterling, Cooper and Ross, the very firm Caleb was using to divorce her. But Daniel had left the firm 2 years ago in a blaze of glory after a falling out with his partners. He hated them. And he had always had a soft spot for Lydia from their college days. Lydia, I heard about the accident. I am so sorry. What can I do? Caleb is trying to divorce me with a settlement of $0, Lydia said, her voice steady. But I just found out I own the algorithm his entire company is built on. And I have proof he embezzled $2 million. There was a long silence on the other end. Then a low chuckle. Lydia, Daniel said. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Put the coffee on. The conference room at Sterling, Cooper and Ross was designed to intimidate. Located on the 45th floor of the Prudential Tower, it featured floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Charles River, a mahogany table long enough to land a plane on, and air conditioning set to a temperature that could freeze whiskey. Caleb Reynolds sat at the head of the table, drumming his fingers on the polished wood. Next to him sat Beatrice Kensington. She was scrolling through her phone, looking bored, wearing a white power suit that cost more than Lydia's former annual salary. Across from them sat Arthur Sterling, the senior partner. He was a man who smiled with his teeth, but never his eyes. She's 10 minutes late, Caleb muttered, checking his Rolex, a gift from Beatrice. This is typical. She's doing this for attention. Relax, darling, Beatrice murmured, not looking up. She's probably stuck in traffic. Or stuck on a curb. Does it matter? We offer her the $50,000, she signs the NDA, and we go to the Hamptons. The heavy oak doors swung open. Lydia didn't roll in looking defeated. She had traded her sweatpants for a sharp, charcoal blazer she had dug out of storage. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant bun. She propelled her wheelchair with deliberate, powerful strokes. Walking beside her, or rather, striding with the energy of a man entering a boxing ring, was Daniel Ross. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. Arthur Sterling's fake smile vanished. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Daniel, Sterling said, his voice tight. I didn't know you were. Back in practice. Hello, Arthur, Daniel said, placing a battered leather briefcase on the table. I'm not back in practice. I'm just here for a specific client. You know how I get about injustice. It gives me hives. Caleb looked confused. Who is this? This, Lydia said, her voice calm and projecting to the back of the room, is my attorney. And we aren't here to sign your NDA, Caleb. Beatrice finally looked up, snapping her phone shut. Let's cut the theatrics. The offer is $50,000. Take it or we bury you in legal fees until you're living in a shelter. Daniel laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. He sat down, not bothering to ask for permission, and opened his briefcase. He pulled out a single, laminated document. Arthur, Daniel addressed his former partner, ignoring Beatrice completely. You've done due diligence on Reynolds Logistics, correct? Before advising the Kensington merger, of course, Sterling. Zgovd. Standard procedure. Then I assume you checked the IP registry for the core routing algorithm. The proprietary software that allows Reynolds to undercut competitors by 15%, Caleb paled. The software belongs to the company, does it? Lydia asked softly. She wheeled herself closer to the table. Do you remember the summer of 2018, Caleb? You were broke. You couldn't afford a developer. I spent 3 months coding Reynolds' route on our kitchen table. I registered the copyright under Lydia Bennett. You never bought it from me. You never licensed it. Daniel slid the document across the table. This is the copyright registration. Lydia Bennett is the sole owner of the IP. Reynolds Logistics has been using it illegally for 5 years. And Kensington Corp is about to merge with a company that owns. Nothing. Silence descended on the room. It was heavy, suffocating silence. Beatrice snatched the paper. Her eyes scanned it, narrowing into slits. She turned slowly to Caleb. Is this true? It was a technicality, Caleb stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. She wrote it for me. We were married. It's marital property. Actually, Daniel interjected, leaning back. Since you filed for divorce in Massachusetts, and the asset was created prior to the incorporation of the LLC, and this is the fun part, you explicitly excluded her from the business assets in your prenup to protect yourself. It remains her sole intellectual property. You played yourself, Caleb. Arthur Sterling was pale. He looked at Beatrice. If she owns the code, the valuation of the merger drops to 0. We can't proceed. So, Lydia said, locking eyes with the woman who stole her husband. Here is my counteroffer. I want 60% of Reynolds Logistics. I want immediate repayment of back-licensing fees for 5 years, calculated at industry standard, which comes to roughly $4.5 million. And I want the house in Brookline back. Fully furnished. You're insane, Caleb hissed. I don't have $4.5 million. The company is leveraged to the hilt. I know, Lydia smiled. I saw the books, Caleb. I saw the Cayman accounts. I saw the $2 million you embezzled from the Series A funding round to cover your crypto losses. Caleb looked like he was going to vomit. Beatrice stood up so abruptly, her chair tipped over. You embezzled money. Beatrice's voice was ice. It was a loan, Caleb pleaded, reaching for her hand. She recoiled. Bae, please, I was going to pay it back once the merger went through. You lied to my father, Beatrice whispered. You lied to the board. He did, Daniel confirmed. And if we don't get what we want by 5:00 p.m. tomorrow, I send this entire file, embezzlement proof included, to the SEC and the district attorney. Lydia turned her wheelchair around. Tick-tock, Caleb. I'd start packing. I hear federal prison is not wheelchair accessible. So at least you won't have to worry about ramps. They left the room in stunned silence. As the elevator doors closed, Daniel let out a long breath and high-fived Lydia. That, he said, was biblical, but Lydia didn't smile. Her hands were shaking. They won't fold that easily, Daniel. Beatrice isn't just a socialite. She's a shark. She won't let the merger fail. She'll come for us. Let her come, Daniel said, his eyes dark. I brought the harpoons. Lydia was right. The silence from Caleb's camp lasted exactly 6 hours. That evening, Lydia was back in her damp basement apartment, the high of the confrontation wearing off, replaced by the throbbing ache in her spine. She was heating up soup when a heavy knock rattled the door. She expected Caleb, or perhaps a process servo. Instead, when she opened the door, she found 2 men in dark suits. They were built like linebackers, with earpieces and the distinct lack of necks that suggested private security. Between them stood Silas Kensington. The CEO of Kensington Corp was a legend in Boston. 70 years old, with silver hair and eyes that looked like they had seen everything and felt nothing. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed. Mrs. Reynolds, he said. His voice was gravel. May I come in? Lydia hesitated, then backed up her chair. It's Ms. Bennett. And you can come in, but my lawyer is on speed dial. Silas looked around the dingy apartment, taking in the water stains on the ceiling and the makeshift ramp. He didn't sneer like his daughter. He nodded as if assessing a battlefield. My daughter tells me you have my company in a bind, Silas said, standing in the center of the room. He didn't sit. There was nowhere to sit. Your daughter's fiancé stole my work and my money, Lydia corrected. Caleb is a fool, Silas dismissed him with a wave of his hand. He is a disposable asset. I suspected the books were cooked, but he had a certain charm that appealed to Beatrice. I indulge her. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a checkbook. But I do not indulge blackmail, Ms. Bennett. The merger is critical for my company's stock price next quarter. I cannot have a scandal involving embezzlement and stolen IP. It would spook the shareholders. He uncapped a gold fountain pen. Name your price. Cash. Tax-free. You sign the rights to the software over to me, you burn the evidence of the embezzlement, and you disappear. You can buy a house in the south of France. You can get the best doctors in Switzerland. Just name the number. Lydia looked at the checkbook. It was tempting. God, it was tempting. She could end the war right now. She could be comfortable. Safe. 10 million, Silas suggested when. She didn't answer. 20, Lydia looked at her legs. She remembered the crunch of the metal. She remembered Caleb's face when he left her at the curb. She remembered the humiliation. Money fixes problems. But money doesn't fix betrayal. It's not about the money, Mr. Kensington, Lydia said quietly. Everything is about money, Sellers snapped, losing his cool for a fraction of a second. Not this, Lydia said. Caleb destroyed my life. He left me for dead. He treated me like garbage because I was broken. If I take your money, he gets away with it. He marries Beatrice. He becomes rich. He wins, he will be my son-in-law, Sellers said coldly. I will protect him to protect the family name. Then you'd better protect him well, Lydia said, her eyes blazing. Because I'm not selling. I'm taking it all back. Get out of my house. Sellers stared at her for a long moment. He capped his pen. You are making a mistake, Miss Bennet. A very dangerous mistake. Accidents happen to people. Especially people who are already fragile. The threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Are you threatening me? I am advising you, Sellers said. The Kensington Annual Charity Gala is tomorrow night. We will be announcing the merger. If you have not accepted my offer by then, I will unleash legal hell on you. I will sue you for corporate espionage. I will claim you stole the code from us. I will bury you so deep you will never see the sun. He turned and walked out, his security detail trailing him. Lydia sat in the silence, her heart pounding. She called Daniel. He threatened me, she said, her voice trembling. Sellers Kensington came to my house. I know, Daniel said. I have a tale on you. My guy saw him go in, he offered 20 million, and I told him to go to hell, Daniel chuckled. Good girl. But now we have to move fast. If he announces the merger tomorrow, he creates a narrative. We need to blow it up before he gets to the podium. How? We are going to the gala, Daniel said. I hope you have a dress. The Kensington Gala was the event of the season. Held in the grand ballroom of the Copley Plaza Hotel, it was a sea of black ties, diamonds, and champagne. The press was there in droves, cameras flashing as Boston's elite mingled. Caleb stood by the stage, looking nervous. He was drinking heavily. Beatrice was beside him, looking radiant and utterly unconcerned. She gripped his arm, her nails digging into his suit jacket. Smile, she hissed. My father is watching. She's not going to sign, Caleb whispered. I know Lydia. She's stubborn. She'll sign, Beatrice said. Father has methods. Besides, who is going to listen to a crippled ex-wife? Over the Kensingtons, suddenly a hush fell over the entrance. Lydia Bennet had arrived. She wasn't wearing a dress. She was wearing a tuxedo, a feminine cut, sleek black silk with a crisp white shirt. She sat in a new, ultra-lightweight carbon fiber wheelchair that Daniel had procured for her. It looked less like medical equipment and more like a chariot. Daniel walked beside her, looking dapper in a midnight blue tux. Security stepped forward to block them. Invitation, the head guard grunted. I'm a shareholder, Lydia said loudly, her voice carrying over the quieted room. Technically, I'm the majority shareholder of the company being acquired tonight. Flashbulbs erupted. The press turned their cameras from the stage to the entrance. Sellers Kensington marched down from the stage, his face purple with rage. "Remove them," he shouted to security. "Touch me," Daniel said, stepping in front of Lydia, "and I'll have every news outlet in this room live streaming a police brutality lawsuit within 5 minutes. We have a right to be here." The reporters smelled blood. They swarmed. "Ms. Bennett, is it true you're suing Reynolds Logistics, Caleb? Do you have a comment on the allegations?" Caleb looked like a deer in headlights. He looked at Sellers. He looked at Beatrice. Beatrice stepped forward, grabbing a microphone from a stunned MC. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice shrill. "Please ignore the disruption. This is simply a bitter woman who couldn't keep her husband, trying to ruin his happiness," the crowd murmured. It was a low blow, but effective. People loved a scandal, but they hated awkwardness. They started to turn back to the stage. Lydia didn't flinch. She wheeled herself to the center of the room. She didn't need a microphone. She had the truth. "I didn't lose my husband," Lydia shouted. "I saved his life. And while I was learning to walk again, he sold our home to pay for his fraud." She pulled a tablet from her bag. Daniel held it up. He tapped the screen. The massive projection screen behind the stage, which was displaying the Kensington logo, suddenly flickered. Daniel had a friend in Av. The logo disappeared. In its place appeared a video. It was grainy, shot from a cell phone camera hidden on a bookshelf. It was the recording from the previous day, inside Lydia's apartment. On screen, Caleb was pacing in the basement. "I had to do it, Lydia. I took the 2 million because the crypto market crashed. If Sellers finds out, I'm dead. You have to help me cover it up." The ballroom went deathly silent. On screen, Lydia's voice. "You embezzled from investors, Caleb." On screen, Caleb. "Yes. But Beatrice knows. She said if I get the merger done, her dad will fix the books." Gasps rippled through the room. Beatrice dropped her champagne glass. "It shattered," the sound echoing like a gunshot. Sellers Kensington froze. He looked at his daughter. "You knew?" Beatrice backed away. "No. He's lying. It's deepfake. It's AI," but the video continued. On screen, Caleb. Beatrice said, "We just need to stall you until the wedding. Then spousal privilege protects me. She doesn't love me, Lyd. She just needs a husband to access her trust fund. But I still love you." The video cut to black. Every eye in the room was on Caleb Reynolds. He stood on the stage, stripped of his dignity, his secrets laid bare. He looked at Beatrice. She looked at him with pure, unadulterated hatred. "You idiot," she whispered, audible to everyone in the front row. "You wired, pathetic idiot." Lydia sat in the center of the room, her head held high. She looked at Caleb. "I'm not the broken one, Caleb," she said, her voice cutting through the silence. "You are." The fallout was immediate, and catastrophic. The Kensington Gala ended not with a toast, but with police sirens. The SEC didn't wait for business hours when video evidence of fraud involving a publicly traded company went viral. Caleb was arrested on the steps of the Copley Plaza. The image of him in handcuffs, his tuxedo disheveled, weeping as he was led into a squad car, was splashed across every newspaper in the country the next morning. But the real drama happened in the boardroom of Kensington Corp 3 days later. Lydia was invited. She didn't have to break in this time. The board of directors sat around the table, looking grim. Selfless Kensington was at the head, but he looked 10 years older. Beatrice was nowhere to be seen. She had fled to a spa in Switzerland to recover from the trauma. Ms. Bennett, the chairman of the board, a man named Harrison Ford, no relation, but just as serious, spoke. "We have reviewed the evidence. The merger is obviously cancelled." "Obviously," Lydia said. Daniel sat beside her, taking notes. "However," Harrison continued, "there is the matter of the intellectual property. Reynolds Logistics is now in receivership. The assets are frozen. But your algorithm is embedded in our systems due to the preliminary integration. Removing it would cost us millions. That sounds like a you problem," Daniel noted. "We want to make a deal," Selfless grunted. He wouldn't look Lydia in the eyes. "We will buy the IP. Fair market value. And we will pay damages for the distress caused." Lydia looked at the contract they slid over. $25 million. It was more money than she could spend in a lifetime. It was victory. But Lydia had one condition. "I'll sign," Lydia said. "But I want one thing." "Anything," Selfless said. "Just sign it and end this nightmare. I want the patent for the spinal implant technology your medical division is developing," Lydia said. The room went silent. Kensington Medical was working on a revolutionary neural bridge device. It was experimental. That's worth billions potentially," Selfless stammered. "And it's nowhere near ready." "I don't want the profit rights," Lydia said. "I want to be patient zero. I want the prototype. And I want your best team dedicated to my rehabilitation on your dime for as long as it takes." Selfless stared at her. He realized then that he wasn't dealing with a victim. He was dealing with a survivor. "Done," Selfless whispered. 6 months later, the courtroom was packed for the sentencing of Caleb Reynolds. He had pleaded guilty to wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Beatrice Kensington had avoided jail time by turning state's witness against him, testifying that he had manipulated her. She threw him to the wolves to save her trust fund. Lydia sat in the front row. When the judge asked if the victim wanted to make a statement, Lydia wheeled herself forward. "Your Honor," Lydia said, "Mr. Reynolds told me that my paralysis made me a burden. He said he had a future, and I didn't. Today, I am the owner of a foundation that helps spinal cord injury victims fight legal battles. I have a new home. I have a life. She looked at Caleb. He was gaunt, wearing an orange jumpsuit. He couldn't meet her eyes. And Mr. Reynolds has a future too, Lydia continued. 5 to 10 years in a federal facility. I hope he finds the time to reflect on the weight of his choices. Gravity catches up to us all eventually, the gavel banged. 7 years. As the bailiffs led Caleb away, he finally looked at her. He mouthed one word, sorry. Lydia didn't mouth anything back. She simply turned her chair and wheeled out of the courtroom. Outside, the sun was shining. Daniel was waiting by her car, a new, custom-fitted SUV. Ready to go, he asked. One stop first, Lydia said. Where? The rehabilitation center, Lydia smiled, touching the small scar on her lower back where the experimental Kensington chip had been implanted 2 weeks ago. I moved my big toe this morning, Daniel. I have some work to do, Daniel grinned. You're terrifying, you know that. I know, Lydia said. Now drive. 5 years is a long time to sit in a cell. It is enough time to count the bricks in a wall, 412, enough time to read every book in the library cart, and enough time to realize that the world does not pause just because you have stopped moving. Caleb Reynolds walked out of the Federal Correctional Institution in Danbury on a Tuesday. The sky was a bruised purple, threatening snow. He wore the grey sweatpants and thin windbreaker the facility had issued him, carrying his personal effects. In a clear plastic bag, a toothbrush, a stick of deodorant, and $40 in cash. He stood by the gate, scanning the parking lot. He didn't expect a limousine. He didn't expect Beatrice Kensington. But a small, delusional part of him expected someone. Maybe an old college buddy. Maybe his mother, though she hadn't written in 2 years. The lot was empty. Caleb Reynolds, once the CEO of Boston's fastest-growing logistics firm, once the husband of the brilliant Lydia Bennett, and briefly the fiancé of an heiress, walked to the bus stop alone. He looked at his reflection in the plexiglass of the shelter. His hair was thinning, grey at the temples. His skin was sallow from years of artificial light and prison food. He looked like a ghost of the man who used to wear Italian suits. He used half his cash for a ticket to South Station. Boston had changed. The skyline was sharper, piercing the clouds with new glass towers. But the cold was the same. It bit through his thin jacket as he wandered toward the halfway house in Dorchester that his parole officer had assigned. Name, the intake coordinator grunted, not looking up from a sticky clipboard. Caleb Reynolds, bed 14. Curfew is 9:00 p.m. No alcohol. No drugs. You miss a check-in, you go back to Danbury. Clear, clear. Caleb sat on the sagging mattress of bed 14, staring at the water stains on the ceiling. It was eerily similar to the apartment he had forced Lydia into 5 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on him, it choked him. Finding a job with a felony record for financial fraud was impossible. The irony of his situation deepened when he realized the only industry hiring felons with no questions asked was manual labor in warehousing, the very bottom of the logistics chain he used to dominate. He got a job at a fulfillment center in Chelsea. Burger, table, label, repeat, 10 hours a day, minimum wage. His back ached, his feet swelled, and every time he saw a manager walk by in a clean shirt, he felt a spike of murderous envy. But he had a plan. He had been tracking Beatrice Kensington. She hadn't gone to prison. Her father's lawyers had painted her as a victim of Caleb's manipulation. She had been quietly shuffled off to Europe for a few years, but the tabloids reported she was back in Boston, launching a new wellness brand. Caleb saved his money for 3 months. He bought a second-hand suit from a thrift store. It was a little too big in the shoulders, a polyester blend that shined under harsh light, but it was a suit. He got a haircut. He knew she would be at the opening of her new gallery on Newbury Street. He didn't have an invitation, but he knew the caterers. He slipped in through the kitchen, blending into the crowd. The gallery was white, sterile, and filled with people who smelled like money. And there she was, Beatrice. She looked older, harder. Her platinum bob was now a sharp, asymmetrical cut. She was laughing at something a man in a velvet blazer was saying. Caleb approached her. Beatrice, she turned. Her smile didn't just fade, it vanished. She looked at him like he was a stain on her white carpet. Security, she said, her voice flat. Wait, Caleb hissed, grabbing her arm. You owe me, Beat. I took the fall. I did 7 years. You testified against me. I told the truth, Beatrice said, yanking her arm away. She dusted the sleeve of her dress as if his touch was contagious. You were a fraud, Caleb. You were broke when I met you, and you're broke now. You were never in my league. I did it for us. I embezzled that money to buy you the ring. I never asked for a ring, she laughed, a cruel, tinkling sound. I asked for a partner. You were just a desperate little climber. And look at you now. Polyester. Really, 2 large security guards materialized. Get him out, Beatrice said, turning her back. And wiped down the door handle he touched. Caleb was thrown out into the alley. He landed hard on his hands and knees in a puddle of slush. The humiliation was total. He had nothing. No leverage. No money. No allies. He trudged through the snow, aimless. He passed a newsstand. A magazine cover caught his eye. Forbes Women to Watch. On the cover was a woman in a sleek navy blue power suit. She was standing, leaning elegantly on a silver-handled cane. Her eyes were fierce, staring straight into the camera. Lydia Bennett, the architect of the new logistics. Caleb bought the magazine with his last $5. He sat on a park bench, shivering, and read the article. Lydia hadn't just survived, she had ascended. After the settlement with Kensington Corp, she had used the money to launch Bennett Systems. She had perfected the algorithm she wrote. It was now the industry standard for automated shipping. But the article mentioned something else. Ms. Bennett also heads the Phoenix Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to legal aid for spouses abandoned after traumatic injury. Her latest venture, however, is personal. She has acquired the assets of a defunct logistics firm to launch a second chance hiring program. The defunct firm wasn't named. Caleb's heart hammered. A second chance program. For ex-cons. It was crazy. It was suicidal. But it was his only play. He knew the software. He knew the business. If he could just get in a room with her, show her he had changed, show her he was humble. Maybe she had a heart. She used to be soft. She used to be the woman who made him soup when he had the flu. He found the address for Bennett Systems. It was in the Seaport District, in a glass building that looked like a jagged crystal. The receptionist looked skeptical when Caleb walked in, but the second chance initiative was real. He filled out an application. He took a basic competency test. He scored 100%. Mr. Reynolds, the hiring manager, a young woman named Sarah, looked at his file. You have extensive experience. I used to run a similar company, Caleb said, keeping his eyes on the desk. Before my mistakes, well, your test scores are off the charts. The CEO handles the final interviews for this program personally. She believes in vetting the candidates. Caleb's throat went dry. The CIO, Ms. Bennett. She's in today. Can you wait? Caleb sat in the waiting room for an hour. He rehearsed his speech. Lydia, I'm sorry. I was weak. I've paid my debt. I just need a job. I'll sweep floors. Please. Mr. Reynolds, the door to the corner office opened. It wasn't Lydia. It was a man. Daniel Ross. He looked older, distinguished. His suit was bespoke. He looked at Caleb with a mixture of amusement and pity. Come in, Caleb, Daniel said. Caleb walked in. The office was massive, with a panoramic view of the harbor. But his eyes went to the woman standing by the window. Lydia turned around. The wheelchair was gone. She stood tall, perhaps 5'8" in her heels. She held a cane, but she didn't seem to lean on it heavily. It was more of an accessory than a necessity. The Kensington neural bridge had worked. She looked strong, beautiful, and terrifying. Hello, Caleb, she said. Her voice wasn't the raspy whisper from the hospital. It was the voice of a titan. Lydia, Caleb choked out. You look incredible, I know, she said. She walked over to her desk and sat down. Daniel leaned against the wall, arms crossed. You're applying for a job as a... Let's see. Junior dispatch coordinator. I need a job, Lydia. No one will hire me. I wonder why, Daniel murmured. I read about your program, Caleb said, stepping forward. Second chances. That's what it's about, isn't it? Lydia picked up his application. It is. We believe that people can rebuild. But there's a condition for working at Bennett Systems. Anything. I'll do anything. The condition, Lydia said, is honesty. So tell me, Caleb, why are you here? Really, I told you I need work. No, Lydia shook her head. You're here because Beatrice threw you out. You're here because you realized that without me, you were never a genius. You were just a charismatic face borrowing my brain. Caleb flinched. That's not fair. It's a fact, Lydia said. She opened a folder on her desk. I bought the assets of Reynolds Logistics from the receivership 3 years ago, Caleb. I own your old company. I own your old branding. I even own the desk you used to sit at. She gestured to the corner. There it was. His old mahogany desk, now holding a printer. I kept it as a reminder, she said, of what happens when you underestimate people. Lydia, please. Caleb fell to his knees. The pride was gone. I have nothing. I'm living in a shelter. I'm eating garbage. Help me. We were married. Doesn't that mean anything? Lydia looked down at him. The man she had thrown her body in front of a truck to save. The man she had loved. And she felt nothing. No hate. No anger. Just a profound, hollow indifference. It means I know exactly who you are, she said. She stood up and walked around the desk. She stopped in front of him. The cane clicked rhythmically on the floor. I'm going to hire you, Caleb. Caleb looked up, tears streaming down his face. Thank you. Oh God, thank you. You start tomorrow. Night shift. The warehouse in Chelsea. Caleb froze. The warehouse, we acquired it last week. You'll be packing boxes. Minimum wage. No benefits for the first 90 days. And you'll report to a floor manager named Gary. But I was the CEO. I can help with strategy. You are a felon convicted of fraud, Daniel interjected. You aren't touching the books. You aren't touching the strategy. You move boxes. Or you leave. Lydia leaned down. This is your second chance, Caleb. You wanted to build an empire. Start at the bottom. Like I did when I had to learn to move my toes again. Like I did when I had to crawl from that basement apartment you put me in. Caleb stared at her. He saw the steel in her eyes. There was no mercy there, only justice. I can't pack boxes, he whispered. I have a bad back. I have a severed spinal cord, Lydia said, straightening up. And I'm standing in heels. Get out of my office, Caleb. Shift starts at 6:00 p.m. Don't be late, Caleb stood up slowly. He looked at Daniel, who offered him a small, grim smile. He looked at Lydia, who had already turned back to her computer, dismissing him as if he were nothing more than a vendor invoice. He walked to the door. "Oh, and Caleb," Lydia called out without looking up. He paused, hand on the doorknob. "The warehouse is temperature-controlled," she said. "It's warm." "Much better than the basement in Southie." Caleb walked out. 3 years later. Lydia Bennett stood on the balcony of her penthouse overlooking the Charles River. The winter air was crisp, but she was warm in a cashmere coat. Daniel walked out behind her, handing her a glass of red wine. He wrapped an arm around her waist, and she leaned into him. They weren't married. Lydia had had enough of marriage licenses, but they were partners in every sense of the word. "The quarterly reports are in," Daniel said, kissing her temple. "Profits are up 15%. Good," Lydia said. "Allocate the surplus to the spinal research grant." "Already done," Daniel paused. "We also got a resignation letter today." Lydia raised an eyebrow. "Oh, personnel file 90,210. Caleb Reynolds." Lydia took a sip of wine. She hadn't thought about that name in months. "Did he find a better job?" "No," Daniel said. "He quit. Said the work was too hard. He's moving to Florida to live with a distant cousin." Lydia looked out at the city lights. She thought about the man who had left her for dead, the man who had chosen money over loyalty. He had been given a chance to work, to rebuild, to prove he had grit. And he had quit. Because that's who he was. Some people break when they are hit, others break open and reveal gold. Caleb was just hollow plaster. "Let him go," Lydia said softly. "He's gone," Daniel agreed. Lydia turned away from the railing. She looked at Daniel, at the life she had built from the wreckage. She touched the scar on her back, a reminder that she had survived the crash and she had survived the divorce. She set her wine glass down. "Come on," she said, taking Daniel's hand. "I'm hungry." "Let's go to dinner." "Where to?" "Somewhere expensive," she smiled. "I'm paying." She walked back inside, her steps strong, steady, and unassisted. The cane was left leaning against the balcony railing, forgotten in the moonlight. She didn't need it anymore. She didn't need any of it. Lydia Bennett was finally completely free. Lydia's journey from a hospital bed to the boardroom proves that the strongest steel is forged in the hottest fire. Caleb thought he could discard her like a broken toy, but he forgot that she was the engine that made his life run. In the end, he didn't just lose his wife. He lost his fortune, his freedom, and his dignity, while Lydia reclaimed everything he tried to steal. It's a brutal reminder. Be careful who you step on while climbing the ladder, because they might just be the one holding it up. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal and ultimate revenge, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. What would you have done if you were in Lydia's shoes? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.